Good morning. Today is Sunday. I think it's January 15th, but I'm going to check my calendar real quick. Yep, it's the 15th. Tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day, January 16th, 2023, and it will be 1 year exactly that I've been pastoring at the Sacred Ground Baptist Church. So I've survived a year, and I don't know that I've been told to step off yet. I said last year when I took this position, let's see what a year brings. And what has a year brought so far? Well, I guess that's up to you. I think we've gone through a lot of changes, a lot of ups and downs, and we're working on things. I don't want to be program heavy, but we're trying to do things that will attract people, and including Sunday school or children's church to try to attract young people. We're still working on getting Kenny here from Curacao. He should have been in place September 1st, and I believe he's been held up for spiritual reasons. Who knows? As someone said, maybe God just wants him to reach somebody there in Curacao. Maybe there's things that we need to wrap up here in town that I'm working on. Who knows? I know that the Lord is sovereign. That's for sure. He's in charge, and I don't say that lightly. Well, today I'm going to be preaching out of 2 Samuel. I've been attempting to go through the Bible one book at a time, and that brings me up to 2 Samuel. I won't rehearse the order of things again, but I've gone directly from Genesis, which leads me up to 2 Samuel. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, in 1 Samuel, we found ourselves in church on Sunday morning without our main children's church leader, and my wife was going to step up and help, and we're kind of mourning through the loss of her father, Bob, granddad, who did live with us for 3 years, lived another 2 years in the care facilities, and he passed away on December 31st of last year, the same day that Rick Russell passed away on the year prior. So it's interesting as we march through these years how things are unfolding for us, and now more than ever we need to rely on the Lord. And it's a privilege to be able to lead this group as the senior pastor, and I'm not doing it alone. I continue to establish the fact that Jesus is the Lord. He's the boss. He's the good shepherd, and I'm certainly an underling. I'm serving him. I'm a worker in his vineyard. That's what I am. So I just want to pray, Father, as I step forward to speak today and to try to teach and read out of your word, that you would fill me with your spirit and your presence. And I thank you for that. Lord, you are with me, and I shall not be afraid. As your word says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And I could quote the entire Psalm 23, but I won't. But you are with me, Lord. And it's a beautiful recitation of the truth of your word and the truth of you. And so help me as I go through this and kind of get my feel for what I should deliver this morning in church. That's basically what I'm doing. So the other day, I took a shower mid-morning, early morning, and when I got out, I heard, I didn't even hear it, I just had 3629 in my head. I go, wonder what that is. It sounds like a scripture. So it was on Wednesday of this week, and I looked up all the chapters, all the books in the Bible that had at least 36 verses, and I found there were just 9, and they were all in the Old Testament. And then I looked for the 29th verse, and not all of them had the 29th verse, but Job 36:29 from the New King James Version does say, "Indeed, can anyone understand the spreading of clouds, the thunder from the canopy?" And that's certainly appropriate for this season. It was raining even as I came out here this morning. And it's been thundering like, I'm not sure I've remembered thunder like this. And fortunately, the last big thundering, I was awake. It was during the day, and I had both dogs on either side of me, and normally they don't like the thunder. But my presence there seemed to calm them, just as the presence of the Lord does calm us, no matter what we're going through. So another scripture is from Ezekiel chapter 36:29, and it's this verse. "I will save you from all your uncleanness. I will summon the grain and make it plentiful, and I will not bring famine upon you." Oh, that's a good verse. And could that be appropriate for someone right now? Again, Ezekiel 36:29, "I will save you from all your uncleanness. I will summon the grain and make it plentiful, and I will not bring famine upon you." In context, the context is a new heart and a new spirit. And Ezekiel 36:28 says, "Then you will live in the land that I gave your forefathers. You will be my people, and I will be your God." 29, "I will save you from all your uncleanness. I will summon the grain and make it plentiful, and I will not bring famine upon you." Verse 30, "I will also make the fruit of the trees and the crops of the field plentiful, so that you will no longer bear reproach among the nations on account of famine." I think that's a great verse. So that just popped into my heart, my spirit the other day. I wasn't even trying. I wasn't asking for a word from the Lord. But that is Ezekiel 36. And I just read 28, 29, and 30 because I heard 36:29 in my heart. So today I'm going to speak from 2 Samuel. And last time, again, we kind of redirected my sermon, and I ended up teaching the children. And I've got to say, a lot of people enjoyed that. It was simple, which should give me some direction. And it was from the heart. And it was from 1 Samuel. And it keyed on the calling of young Samuel. I had 1 Samuel kind of broken up into 4 stories. The story of Hannah, who was barren. She cried out to the Lord, and he heard her. And she said, "If you would bring me a child, I will dedicate him to you." And so Samuel was born and was dedicated to the temple priest and dedicated as a Levitical person, which means he wouldn't drink alcohol or wouldn't cut his hair. And when young Samuel heard the calling of the voice of the Lord, he didn't understand who it was. And he ended up saying, after God kept calling his name, "Here I am. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." That's what he said. "Speak, for your servant is listening." And that's what we need to do today. That should be our response to God. "Your servant, speak, Father, your servant is listening." And so I didn't get to talk about the full chapter, which would be basically the life of Samuel and the life of David. But 2 Samuel is all about the life of David. And I don't mind going back into 1 Samuel because originally, apparently, 1 and 2 Samuel were one book written during the period of Samuel, who was a prophetic leader of Israel that helped transition Israel from the period of the judges to the period of the kings. And remember, the people of Israel did what they would do. They would get stubborn and obstinate and forget the Lord, and they would be attacked, and overcome and overwhelmed by their enemies and bad situations, and then they would cry out, and God in his mercy would hear them and say, okay, you're following after me, and he would bring a judge, and they would be rescued from their enemies. And at one point they cried out, we don't like these judges, we want to have a king like all the other nations. And even though God promised to be their king, the people said, no, we want an earthly king. And so that's where Saul came in. And Saul was a good-looking man. He did some wonderful things, but his heart was not what God was looking for. He tended to do things on his own power, on his own might, and he grieved the Lord. Saul grieved the Lord, King Saul, and at one point Samuel addressed him and said, your kingdom is going to be torn away from you. And God says, I'm going to appoint the kingship to a man after my own heart. And so that was David. And David was out in the field. He was called as a boy, similar to Samuel. And it comes from First Samuel. I said I didn't mind going back into the book of First Samuel because they were kind of the same. They were separated, I understand, when the New Testament saints translated the Old Testament Greek writing the Old Testament Hebrew writing into Greek, and that's called the Septuagint. And that's apparently when this division happened into 1st and 2nd Samuel. So let's go over where David is called as a boy. It's from 1st Samuel chapter 16. So Samuel anoints David. Samuel the prophet anoints David. The Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. We've talked about Bethlehem and the importance of it, and Jerusalem and that whole area. I have chosen one of his sons to be king. But Samuel said, how can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me. Because Saul was very jealous of David. He was afraid of David, and he tried to kill him, and he sought him. And it was a period of 20-some years that David was attempting to save his own life, or directed by the Lord. Saul just wasn't a good guy, and he was trying to kill David. The Lord said to Samuel, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate. And Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him, and they asked, do you come in peace? And Samuel replied, yes, in peace. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Come, consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me. Consecrate means prepare yourself, cleanse yourself. Make sure at the time that they hadn't done anything that was forbidden. And it's kind of like get ready to go to church. I know when I was first asked way back a long time ago to help take the offering in church, I thought, how can I do that? I'm a sinner. It's almost like Peter saying to Jesus in the boat, Lord, depart from me, I'm a sinful man. And I remember having that feeling years ago when I was asked just to simply share in taking the offering. It's like, how can I do this? I'm just a guy. So consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice. And then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. And when they arrived, Samuel saw Elijah and thought, Samuel saw Eliah, the oldest son of Jesse, and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things that man looks at. And that's a lesson of life. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And that's, in fact, still the story today. I just heard a preacher yesterday say that he's found in all his years of ministry that usually the person that God chooses to do something doesn't want to do it. I don't know why that is, and he didn't know why that is either, but the Lord looks at a person's heart, not the outward appearance. Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel, but Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse then had Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, the dad, "Are these all the sons you have?" "They're still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He is tending the sheep." And Samuel said, "Send for him. We will sit down until he arrives." And it's interesting that Samuel, when he was presented with David, what was David doing? He was a young man, young boy, shepherding the sheep out in his father's field. Contrast that with Saul, who was, when he was sent out and anointed king, the first king, by Samuel, he was sent out to find lost donkeys. I just find that funny. So Saul was tending donkeys, and David, who has a heart after God, was shepherding sheep. Okay, so 1 Samuel 16, verse 12. So he sent and had him brought in. Now David was ruddy, with a fine appearance and handsome features. And then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. He is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power. And Samuel then went to Ramah. And we see the conflict between David and Saul. And David, bottom line, was a gifted musician, was a man after God's own heart. Saul wasn't. He was a troubled man. He was afraid of David. He sought David to kill him, and he tried to kill him himself a couple of times. And David developed a friendship with Saul's son Jonathan, and I love this relationship. It shows me and has led me over the years to know that if there are 2 people working together, you can establish a lot of things. Just 2 people together in agreement. I'm going to show up at this Bible study with you. I'm going to establish this radio station with you. I'm going to do this with you. One person is good, can get a lot done, but 2 people working together are awesome. And I base a lot of that upon the relationship of Jonathan and David. They loved each other. And Jesus even says, "Love your neighbor as you love yourself." Jonathan loved David as he loved himself, and he recognized that God had anointed David to become the king of Israel. And even though Jonathan was in the natural line to become the king, he gladly said, "You are the man." And he didn't try to take the power for himself. And so it was a wonderful friendship, showing you that 2 men can definitely love each other without having that sexual relationship that the world will tell you today is fine. It's not fine. The Bible says that it's not a sexual relationship between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. It's just not, according to the Word. And we stand on the Word of God. That may rub a lot of people the wrong way, but you can love someone without having that occurring. And Jonathan and David were a part of that, and indicating a proper relationship. So David, I'm talking about King David this morning. I'm still in 1 Samuel. Let's go to 1 Samuel 17:45. And this, of course, is David and Goliath. If you consider David's life, he was famous for being anointed as a young boy, anointed king. He's famous for slaying Goliath. And this is in 1 Samuel 17, and it's subtitled David and Goliath. Now, I think I'll read the whole story because I'm trying to figure out what verse would be appropriate. I don't know if the whole chapter would be appropriate. I have 1 Samuel 17:45 as a highlight, but I'm just going to read from the beginning. Verse 1, 17 of 1 Samuel. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Succoth in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes-Dammim between Socoh and Azekah, Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with a valley between them. And this is a lot of reading, so I may not read all of this during the service this morning. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze, weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves with a bronze javelin, which was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. So the bottom line is, this is a scary big guy, and he was called a giant, Goliath the giant. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servant of Saul, the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Kind of a concept of, let's not go to war, let's have one man from each side fight this out, and whoever wins will be the victor, and we can spare all this bloodshed. So that was kind of the concept of the day. Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of an Ephraimite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was old and well advanced in years. That would be Jesse, David's father. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And we've already seen that Samuel was not directed by the Lord to appoint any of them king, but he was appointed he was directed to appoint and anoint David, the youngest boy, as king of Israel. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul. But David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take the sephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of the unit, and see how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them." And I find it interesting. I think about food. Will we have shortages? Well, the Lord promises his children that we will not be short. Maybe there's going to be a famine around us, but I'm interested in what they took to eat. And they made bread, they had roasted grain, they had cheese, and of course they sacrificed a lot of animals, so they did have a lot of barbecue. I find that interesting. Okay, so 1 Samuel 17:20. Early in the morning, David left the flock with a shepherd. Someone was taking his place. He loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies. He ran to the battle lines and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel." Now this particular story was used when I was a young man and trying to learn how to sell stuff. They used this as an example and saying, See, when you're a salesman and when you're in sales, you have a reward for your work. And David was not unlike that. He was going to get a reward for his work. So not only was he doing what God has called him to do, he was going to be rewarded, and he was okay with that. So David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel?" So he was saying, now what is the reward for this? Because he was a young man and interested, and it's appropriate. You should be rewarded for your work. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." So David had grief from his brother. There's a lesson there. I don't have any brothers. I have 3 sisters. I'm not saying that they've given me grief, but it's natural for siblings to prod each other and to take pot shots at each other. There's no one closer than a brother or a sister that came from the same womb that you came from. 29. "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can't I even speak?" He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." That's what young David said. He had the confidence. Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. And the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Again, I'm reading the entire chapter of 1 Samuel 17. So Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. But he said, "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." Another lesson for life. Go in the strength that you have. You'll learn different methods that work for you, but God has made you unique. As we watched a movie the other day, Kelly and I, it was about a young writer who was trying to find her own voice. A unique voice. We all have a unique voice. Go in the strength that you have. And David said, "I can't fight in your armor. I'm not used to it." So he took off the king's armor. Then he took his staff in his hand. He chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag with his sling in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. And some would say he took 5 stones because there were 5 brothers, 5 giants. I don't know if maybe that was the case. And later on in 2 Samuel, we find that all Israel was capable of slaying giants. And I believe that we are capable of slaying spiritual giants. God has given us the authority and the power. And how did they slay giants? By their faith in the strength of God. And that's what we must do today. We must hold faith in our Almighty God, our sovereign Lord, who is able to do all things, and he just wants to partner with us. So David approached the Philistine, and meanwhile the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Wow, wow, wow. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of all the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Young David the boy said this. So as the Philistine, the giant, moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. Now some would say he just knocked him out and then he killed him with the sword, but that's not what the word says. It says David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. So to me that says he hit him in the forehead with this rock and he killed him. I'm fascinated by the slingshot. My friend Rob Duprat has said, how many hours did he spend out shepherding his sheep, his father's sheep, and practicing with the sling. And in another part, I think it's in Numbers, it talked about left-handed soldiers in the Israeli army. I think there were 700 of them, or maybe 300, but they were so skilled. They were left-handed. They were so skilled with the sling that they could pick off a hair. That's how good they were. And so it wasn't a problem for David to be able to hit the forehead, even if it was the only exposed part of this giant who was covered with armor. He hit the vulnerable spot and killed him. So David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the scabbard. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. And when the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. And I don't know, maybe he did knock him out with the rock and he stabbed him. I don't know, but he was dead before he took his head off. That's what I see. So then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Goth and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Sherim road to Gath and Ekron, and when the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. I'm almost done with chapter 17, so I'll just read the whole part here and then determine what to read during the service this morning. As Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, commander of the army, "Abner, whose son is that young man? Who did that? Who is that guy?" And Abner replied, "As surely as you live, O king, I don't know." The king said, "Find out whose son this young man is." And as soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine head. "Whose son are you, young man?" Saul asked him. And David said, "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem." So those two stories, I think, are what David can be called famous for. Again, I could study the entire the entire book of 2 Samuel. These stories are from 1 Samuel, but I'm dealing with the life of David right now. So there's a couple of passages in 2 Samuel that I'd like to highlight. And David, again, anointed as a young boy to become the king, finally is made king. And in 2 Samuel 5, after the death of King Saul and his beloved son Jonathan, they died in battle on the same day, David becomes the king of Israel. So 2 Samuel chapter 5 says David becomes king over Israel. It says, all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, we are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people, and you will become their ruler. And when all the elders of Israel came to King David at Hebron, the king made a compact with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed King David over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned over all Israel and Judah for 33 years. So he was anointed by Samuel. He was anointed, I think, 3 different times, and this time he becomes the king over Israel. David conquers Jerusalem. It is interesting that Jerusalem is synonymous with Salem. And you'll remember in the Old Testament when Abraham was approached by Melchizedek, it says that he was the king of Salem, a type of Christ back then. And Samuel, or rather Abraham, recognized that and gave an offering to Melchizedek. And Salem was said to be Jerusalem. And it's the same place where Abraham was willing to offer his son Isaac. The same place. And David purchases this spot. It's a threshing floor, and it becomes the temple. It becomes Solomon Temple, the same spot. So let me just read again, because I'm trying to gain my bearing as to what would be the appropriate scripture. In verse 6, 2 Samuel 5, the king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. So the ancient Jerusalem was first run by the Jebusites. I don't know if it was first run, but that's who was in control. The Jebusites said to David, you will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off. It was a fortress. They thought, David cannot get in here. Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, the city of David. On that day, David said, anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind who are David's enemies. That is why they say the blind and lame will not enter the palace. So his way into the city, and I've heard a study on this, was through the aqueduct. The water that came into the city is what David used to enter the city, the passageway in. David then took up residence in the fortress and called it the City of David. He built up the area around it from the supporting terraces inward, and he became more and more powerful because the Lord God Almighty was with him. Where's Jesus in 2 Samuel? He's right here. He's there all the time, kind of like in Genesis, but I love this. The Lord God Almighty was with him. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David along with cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a palace for David. And David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. And then he left Hebron. David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. These are the names, and he had many sons, many daughters, many wives, many concubines. Again, that was not the way God designed things, but it started early in Genesis when God says, be fruitful and multiply. One of the sons of Adam said, oh, if this is what we're supposed to do, then I'm going to quick start my family. I'm going to have more than one wife. But God says, a man shall leave his mother and father and shall cling to his wife, and they shall become one. And that's what we respect as marriage today, between a man and a woman. Biblically sound. David defeats the Philistines in 2 Samuel 5, verse 17. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about him and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord. This is another key part. Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me? So David, a man after God's own heart, inquired of the Lord, which again can relate to us today. We need to ask the Lord every day, shall I do this? Get God's direction. He has a plan. He has a will. We need to be walking according to his will, not ours. It's not appropriate to say, here's my plan, God, would you please bless me? And we do that too many times. Rather, we should be in prayer and ask the Lord, shall I go? And if he says go, then do it. If he says don't do it, then don't do it. So the Lord answered him, go, I will surely hand the Philistines over to you. So David went to Baal Perazim, and there he defeated them. He said, as waters break out, the Lord has broken out against my enemies before me. So that place was called Baal Perazim. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. Once more the Philistines came up and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord. Again, a lesson. Ask the Lord. Well, it worked this last time. Should we do it the same? Let's just do it the same way. No, it's kind of like, as a worship leader, I've tried that. We've had a wonderful time of worship and a song set, and I thought, man, it worked there. Let's just repeat it. It doesn't work. And it's like God's word is new every morning, and I'm learning how to trust and rely on him, even to the point of not panicking so much over the message that I bring, and seeing what the Lord is wanting to do, wanting me to bring this morning before church. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm asking, Lord, would you help me decide which scriptures would be appropriate, because I've romped through a lot, and people can only tolerate so much before they start really daydreaming. And I don't want to be the person that just drones on, and I think with this video that's the case. So sorry about that. But this is the director's cut, if you will. Okay, so once more the Philistines came up and spread out in the valley of Rephaim, and David inquired of the Lord, and he answered. The Lord answered, do not go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the balsam trees. The Lord says to David, as soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army. So David did as the Lord commanded, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. So David is anointed the king. He inquires of the Lord, and back then there was a different way. They used the ephod, he used the priest. Today we have the wonderful privilege of having the Spirit of God inside of us. We no longer have to go to the priest, because Jesus is our high priest, and he is the eternal king. And that's the point of what I want to get to. David was a good king, but he was flawed. He was a man, and he was not a man of bloodshed, but he was a man of war. And so therefore you could assume that he was a man of, he wasn't bloodthirsty. That's what I'm trying to say. He wasn't a bloodthirsty man, like I gotta kill somebody. I don't think so. He became indignant at the direction of the Lord, but he was a flawed man. And David, at one point, after he was established as king, he's in his tower, he's in his high place with cedar all around him, and he started to say, here I am in my comfort, in my palace, and yet the temple of God is still in a tent. And he says, God, let me build you a tent. Let me build you a temple, take you out of the tent. And God said, no, you won't build me a temple. I'll let your son build me a temple. But did I ever ask you to do this? No, I didn't ask you, and I won't let you. But instead, I'm going to build your house. I'm going to establish your kingdom. And I thought that is pretty cool. And it brings to me the concept that we so often want to do something for God. And God allows us to be obedient and to serve him this way. But you think about it, the God of the universe, and I've mentioned this before, partnering up with us? Are you serious? God who spoke creation into existence wants to partner with us. It's like my little hand, and God says, yeah, come on, let's do this together. It blows me away why he wants to do that. And so David was a failed man. Of course, he's famous for being chosen as a young man shepherding sheep. He's famous for killing Goliath, the giant. And he's also famous for his failure with Bathsheba. And what did God do? He took that failure and he turned it around and created something good out of it. The first child of that adulterous affair and the murder that David did, the first child didn't live. The second child born was Solomon, who became king, who became a descendant on the throne in the line of David. And of course, looking down the way, in the line of David comes Jesus, the perfect king. David wasn't a perfect king. Samuel wasn't a perfect king. Saul wasn't a perfect king. I'm not a perfect man. You're not a perfect person. Not one of us has any standing to say, I'm holy and righteous. Oh God, here I am. I don't think so. We need to come in humility before the Lord and say, okay, Father, I will do as you say. So you don't want me to build you a kingdom. You're going to build your own kingdom. And in fact, I've been a part of a church that was kind of its slogan was, I don't even remember the name of it. I could find the bulletin, but basically God will build his kingdom through the church. He's doing the work. We're just participating in it. We're partnering with him. We're like a little child that says, come on, yeah, you can do this with me. Hint, hint. So Jesus is the eternal forever king. We understand that he will reign forever and forever and forever, and he is perfect. And the Bible does say that he will reign for 1,000 years. And in this corrupt society that we live in, more and more people are saying his return is very soon. He promised that he would come back. When he went to the cross, gave his perfect life as a sacrifice for our sins, he died and was laid in the tomb, and he was resurrected out. He rose from the dead. It astounded everybody and has astounded everybody to this day. And he appeared to the believers for as much as 40 days before he rose into the heavens. And they're looking at him rising into the heavens, and there are a couple of angels that said, what are you guys looking at? Just as he has gone into the heavens, so he will return one day. So Jesus has promised that he will return one day, and he will be the king and the ruler, the perfect ruler, and we so look forward to that. And you want to be a part of that. You do not want to be an enemy of God. Believe me, you do not want to be subject to his wrath, and his enemies will pay the price. Those who are stubborn and obstinate will be destroyed. That's what the word says. You don't want to be there. And today, you could guarantee that you won't be there if you believe in your heart. If you believe in your heart that Jesus did this for you. I remember believing it in my heart. In 1979, I was raised as a Christian, as a believer, as a young boy, but I had to come to my own understanding of it. And when I came to that understanding, when I believed, yes, God, you did this for me, I believe. I became saved. It says if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth, you will be saved. And the Spirit of God will come in and live with you. You're giving your life to Jesus. Our famous prayer is, Jesus, come into my heart. Well, the physical Jesus doesn't actually come in like, was it the Pharisee? I can't think of his name, but Jesus was having the conversation with him, Nicodemus. And Jesus said, I tell you, in all earnestness, you must be born again. And the old Jew said, how can that be? How can an old man crawl into his mother's womb? and be born again. And Jesus says, no, that's not what I'm talking about. You were born once in the physical part. Now you must be born again of the spiritual part. You must be born of the flesh and the spirit. You must be born again. And when you take that step of belief, when you put your faith in God, when you say to Jesus, I believe you, you died for my sins, and I am now forgiven because you took my sins upon the cross. You took the punishment for me. You had your back ripped open. You had your hands nailed. Behold the hand. Behold the nail. Behold, that's what Yahweh means. YHVH. We've sung that song this morning. We declare it. And Jesus is the Lord from the beginning. And when you believe that, you are saved. You are in his kingdom. You are transferred from darkness to light because of your belief. Jesus is the eternal, forever King. So, reading through 2 Samuel and the life of David, we can get all of this. Again, I'm skipping and highlighting, and again, I've even pressed into 1 Samuel a little bit because I'm talking about the life of David. Not a perfect man, but a heart after God. And if your heart is after God, and if you believe, you will be saved. And I can pray with you. For anyone who are hearing this, and I have a sense that this is probably, I don't know, I'll be astounded if this is 30 minutes. I bet this is 45 minutes. But the prayer would be, Father, thank you. I do believe that you died for me. You came to rescue me because I can't. On my own, I'm corrupt. I'm bad. I've done bad things. I've had a terrible life, but you want my life. It's not working out very good on my own. And you want my life to be in service to you. And I say, yes, I give my life to you so that I can humbly serve you. Now show me the way to go. Show me and speak to me, even as you spoke to David and said, no, don't do it this way. Do it this way. That's how you lead us by your Spirit. So thank you for your death on the cross for us. Thank you that you rose again and that you promised to come back. And you say to lift up your eyes and look and be on the lookout. And so we're looking for you. You might come back today. This could be the day. But for those people who are listening and have never given their hearts to Jesus, to God, now is the day. And so that's a simple prayer you can pray. And I would say amen. And next week, next time, we'll just progress through the Bible. I'll pray about whether I should continue on. I think I should. Again, my mission is to go through the 66 books of the Bible and get a message from each one. Where is Jesus? And where is Jesus in 1 and 2 Samuel? He's with us. I've been with you. The Lord is my shepherd. Always and always and always. He is with us, even right now. He was with David in 2 Samuel, and he's with us today. So thanks for watching. And I just say amen. Okay, this is an addendum because in romping through so much scripture on the life of David, I left out, I think, the most important part. And I might use some of this in the service this morning because 2 Samuel 7 is where God makes the promise to David. And we can hear about the exploits of a man, but I'd rather hear about the exploits of the Lord. And so God's promise to David in 2 Samuel 7. After the king was settled in his palace and the Lord had given him rest from all his enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am living in a palace of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." And Nathan replied to the king, "Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." So he spoke without really waiting on the Lord or praying about it. He just says, "Oh, fine, do it, whatever you think." But that night the word of the Lord came to Nathan, the prophet of the Lord at the time of David. That night the word of the Lord came to Nathan and said, "Go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in it? I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day. I have been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I have moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their rulers whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture and from following the flock to be ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all your enemies from before you. Now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men of the earth. And I will provide a place for my people Israel, and will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore, as they did at the beginning and have done ever since the time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all your enemies. Wonderful promise. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, who will come from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with the rod of men, with floggings inflicted by men, but my love will never be taken away from him. Initially, I thought that the Lord was talking down the road about Jesus, but he was talking about Solomon, because Jesus didn't fail, Solomon did. My love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me, and your throne will be established forever. Now he is speaking down the line to King Jesus. Nathan reported to David all the words of this entire revelation, and then David's prayer. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord. He abided before him. He just said, I'm going to wait. I'm going to come in, no agenda, nothing particular. I'm just going to come in before you and wait. So David went into the tent where the Ark of the Covenant was. He sat before the Lord. I don't think he went into the Holy of Holies. So maybe he didn't sit before the covenant of the Lord, but he went into the tent. There were places where the king could sit, because the Holy of Holies was reserved for the priest, and only once a year. But David probably got as close as he could get. And then he says, Who am I, O sovereign Lord? And what is my family that you have brought me thus far? And as if this were not enough in your sight, O sovereign Lord, you have also spoken about the future of the house of your servant. Is this your usual way of dealing with man, O sovereign Lord? What more can David say to you? For you know your servant, O sovereign Lord. For the sake of your word, and according to your will, you have done this great thing and made it known to your servant. How great you are, O sovereign Lord! There is no one like you, and there is no God but you, as we have heard with our own ears. And who is like your people Israel, the one nation on earth that God went out to redeem as a people for himself, and to make a name for himself, and to perform great and awesome wonders by driving out nations and their gods from before your people, whom you redeemed from Egypt. You have established your people Israel as your very own forever, and you, O Lord, have become their God. And now, Lord God, keep forever the promise you have made concerning your servant and his house. Do as you promised, so that your name will be great forever. Then men will say, The Lord Almighty is God over Israel, and the house of your servant David will be established before you. O Lord Almighty, God of Israel, you have revealed this to your servant, saying, I will build a house for you. So your servant has found courage to offer you this prayer. O sovereign Lord, you are God. Your words are trustworthy, and you have promised these good things to your servant. Now be pleased to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever in your sight. For you, O sovereign Lord, have spoken. And with your blessing, the house of your servant will be blessed forever. So David's prayer, which became Psalm 18, I think. Well, I'm not sure, actually. But David's prayer was not unlike Mary's prayer when the Lord told young Mary, a descendant of King David, that Mary, you will give birth to the Savior, to the Messiah. She goes, okay, if you say so, be it unto me according to as you say, but I'm a virgin and I'm not even married. But she had the faith that God spoke to her. And so that was her response. And in a sense, David is responding the same way. David said, I want to build you a temple because I know how to, God. And God says, David, no, but I'm going to build your house. And I thought initially that meant the house. And maybe it did mean the house, but it also was looking down the line. I'm going to establish the Savior from your seed, David. Your house will never end. And so isn't Jesus even said to have been from the house of David, O son of David? So that's where that all comes in. Okay, this addendum, because this is important. Where is Jesus in this prayer? In the seed of David. And God is with David. He's providing the victory. He's providing provision. As I spoke at the beginning of this recording, Ezekiel 36:29, yet though there be famine all around you, I will provide for you. And that's what we need to put our hope in the Lord. All right, thanks for watching this addendum.